Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, now time to dig into the Sunday newspapers now. Joining me this morning is the Conservative MP for the City of London and Westminster, Mark Field, the former Labour political strategist, John McTernan, and Christina O'Donnell, the Telegraph columnist and a director at the public policy think tank, the Legatum Institute. Very good morning to you all. Let's let you kick off, Mark, because you've got this fronting the Sunday Times. And
it runs and runs, the grammar school.
It really is going to. Are you a grammar school boy yourself?
I was a grammar school boy, and I think people forget, actually, those of us who've been through the grammar school system, it educated us into politics. I was at grammar school in the 70s and 80s at a time when there was a risk of it going comprehensive. So I'm very positive about what Theresa May is doing. And above all, I think that in the last 20 years, when privileged politicians and prominent politicians from Blair to Cameron to Clegg have talked about education, there's always been a sense of crude calculation with what Theresa May was saying, talking about the great meritocracy. It came from the heart. And I think the other thing that's important to stress, I know we're focusing on grammar schools in the papers today, she also made it very clear there's no return to the two-tier secondary modern second-rate system. And I think one of the most important things post-Brexit is we have got to ensure that technical and apprenticeship education are equally highly sought after and highly successful.
Just back to the story, Mark. I mean, this is saying that some councils are very keen to get on with it.
No, I'm sure they are. I mean, I was at a school literally half a dozen miles away from Theresa May's constituency in Reading in Berkshire, which has got a small number of grammar schools, which are, as I say, a residual from the 60s and 70s. I know that in Berkshire there's a great demand to try and get more of those sorts of schools, the Kents, the Buckinghamshires of this world. But as I say, we've got to do it in tandem with making sure that there is great technical education. This is in the post-Brexit world we're in, we need to have a really skilled workforce, not just at the elite academic level, which is important in itself, but actually beyond that. And I think that's the other part of what Theresa May was saying, but hasn't had as much coverage in the papers.
John, because it was Tony Blair, wasn't it? It was that administration that said no more grammar schools, kind of froze it in aspect. I mean, what's the attitude towards it now?
I think that this is a very dangerous move for Theresa May. She's putting £50 million on the table, which doesn't build very many schools. But she's opening up the potential, not just for winners, the kids who go to grammar schools, but the majority of kids who apply, who are losers. And in politics, it's a really bad idea to create losers who don't need to lose. And we know, all the academic evidence, that grammar schools do not assist social mobility or raise standards. We know how to raise standards. It's what the government's doing at the moment with free schools academies. It's what Labour did with academies. We can improve education for everybody. For all, right. We stick to the policies.
I mean, that is the basic, mantra of most people when it comes to any public services, saying, yes, choice is quite good, but fundamentally I'd like a good school or a good hospital or a good GP surgery, a very good one, as close to me as possible, and I want them all to be good.
Absolutely, and what we want is more of this excellence, which is why she's rolling out more grammar schools. What are the best state schools in terms of delivering academic success? Grammar schools. Absolutely. What do we need to stop making illegal? The creation of more grammar schools. And I think she is speaking to a really big swathe of, yes, middle class Britain, but you know what? The middle class is now a huge...
It's also aspirational, Britain, and I'm not suggesting, I don't think Theresa May is suggesting for 1 minute this is the answer to all the problems getting grammar schools.
Just let me ask
part of the mix that we need to...
We want to bring in a lot more stories here, but I don't want to have it all about this, but I just want to ask you a specific question then, Mark, from the Conservative Party. There are those that are now saying, well, with this and perhaps other policies to come, is Theresa May leading us to an early general election in that she might need a mandate for all this? This wasn't in this shape in the manifesto.
Well, I think a lot has changed since we decided to leave the EU, and I think it's quite right that we're saying it is because we now need to redouble our efforts to get a skilled workforce that we're doing this.
Just on that, do you think she needs a mandate?
I don't think she needs a fresh mandate, and I don't think there's any likelihood of us having an election before 2020.
Okay, Christina, bring us this. Let's move to the opposition, and the left surrendered to Comrade Corbyn, this article by Jason Cowley, editor of the New Statesman, in the Mail on Sunday.
Well, what was so interesting was Jason Cowley is the editor of what is pretty much the left's Bible. And here he is saying, why are the top brass, the Ed Miliband's, the Tony Blair's, the Gordon Browns, keeping stum about Comrade Corbyn? it's because they have completely given up. They feel that this is a party that is in the throes of just a terrible moment, and he speaks to Roy Hattersley, who says, "I have given in to despair." And when one of the greats of the Labour Party speaks so negatively, you really do feel that Emily Thornberry and Jeremy Corbyn are in trouble. But what interests me,
Right, don't go there, Dermot.
The Islington faction.
can I just say that what interested me the most was that Callie also pays real respect, pays real tribute to Theresa May's meritocratic cabinet, and says that with her and Ruth Davidson, who's now the most popular politician in Scotland, as I'm sure John knows, the Tories are beginning to look and sound like the rest of the country. And you know what? He's absolutely right. Under David Cameron, the Tories looked and sounded like Notting Hill Trustafarians.
I don't know if you agree with that, John, but
now,
if they do manage it, I mean, do they stay in power for decades, the way things look at the moment?
Well, nobody stays in power for decades, because the problem for Theresa May, the challenge for Theresa May, is that she's in such absolute command that she has no excuses for not achieving what she promises. So if she doesn't achieve meritocratic results, if she doesn't give better breaks to working class kids in education, or doesn't get delivered to the hard-working families, working class families of Britain, they know who to blame. It's her. It's not Parliament that's stopped her. It's not her party that stopped her. And that's the most difficult situation sometimes for leaders.
I think it's being a little harsh.
Command.
I think it's being slightly harsh. I mean, I think you're right. There is a sense of euphoria.
Judged by her record,
well,
it's not
euphoria
harsh.
won't last forever with this. But equally, I think it's positive that she's got some fresh ideas, and that there is a sense.
And some bold ideas.
There's also a sense of a government having some momentum post the referendum.
And that other part of the article you mentioned there, Christina, the big beasts of the Labour Party heading for the hills, going for mayoralties and chairmanships of select committees. And
anything to get away from the Westminster not bubble but nightmare that their party is experiencing.
Well, John, one of the strongest issues, perhaps of old, for the Labour Party, and something that again Theresa May will have to deal with. This fronting the Observer, our hospitals are on the brink of collapse. A dire warning from some NHS bosses.
Well, I think that's really my point, which is that you can talk about ideas like grammar schools, you can talk about what Brexit means, does it mean Brexit or does it mean something else? But when it comes down to it, bread and butter issues are what determine your popularity. The health service is the central issue for public service, and it has got the tightest squeeze on spending over this whole decade, from the election of the Tories in 2010 in the coalition till 2020. The downward pressure on it is the largest reduction in spending of any health system in the world that's ever happened, and this will lead to some form of crisis. We don't know what kind of crisis, but when that happens,
a cash crisis to start with.
But in terms, will it be A&E waiting lists? Will it be people on trolleys? Will it be a flu crisis coming in winter? And so what we know is there'll be a 1990 style problem. And Margaret Thatcher, faced with this, tried to squeeze health spending. Faced with it, spent 87 to 1990 when she left, pumping money in. John Major did too little too late, and this is going to be a fundamental test, I think, for Theresa May.
I'm going to move it on because there's a lot of interesting stories that we haven't touched on. Mark, bring us this pioneering stem cell team fights blindness. A real medical breakthrough, perhaps?
I think it is a medical breakthrough. One of the reasons I wanted to bring the story up, it's actually rather good exclusive in the Sunday Express, but actually also it's this whole issue of a lot of stem cell work. And then again, in the world post-Brexit, if we're going to have state-of-the-art expertise in our top universities, from Oxbridge to Imperial College London, we need to recognise that we've got to be at the cutting edge of all of this. And funnily enough, because of in the US in particular, there's been hostility because of getting legislation through about stem cell research. This is one of the areas where I think our science expertise really can be rolled out. We can be real world beaters, again, cooperating with other countries across the world, but making sure that a lot of that expertise, jobs and opportunities comes here to these shores post-Brexit.
Think curtailing free movement could affect that? I mean, this is about scientists being being able to move freely around.
I think that clearly there's an element of making sure that the brightest and best are able to come here to have research. But what we're also talking about are essentially global research projects. That these will be projects that won't just be carried out here in the UK, but it'll be cooperation with some of the best universities in China and India.
Maybe
and
by
perhaps in the
Skype,
US.
though, 'cause
But I know that a lot of the scientists that I've been speaking to are very worried about the post-Brexit world in terms of EU funding.
Yeah.
You know, incredible experiments like this one are very much funded by EU cash, EU subsidies, and what they're worried about at Imperial College certainly is the without coming out of the EU.
I can understand, but I think we look upon trade as either being trade in goods or indeed in financial services. This sort of area is something where we have a phenomenal competitive
Intellectual
advantage.
property. Political correctness, a threat to Christmas, Christina. This on the front of the Sunday Telegraph.
Yes, well, I was very interested to see that the community integration czar, Dame Louise Casey, has been talking to councils and saying, look, if you have a well-meaning white English middle-class manager saying that his hospital or his company should have a festive tree rather than a Christmas tree because he's so scared of offending Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs in his office, tell him to stop. We've got to stand up for what she calls British values, but I would say are Judeo-Christian values that we can all share in. And, you know, this is a funny example, the festive tree not being called the Christmas tree, but we actually get into much more sinister areas like the Rotherham gangs, where you had...
Really?
Well, you have police who were so scared of looking like they were racist that they didn't want to blow the cover on any kind of suspected Asian gangs. So we do have to be careful. We belong to a multicultural society that has plenty of diversity and plenty of wonderful immigrant populations and immigrant principles. But
the line's got to be drawn somewhere.
We must stand up.
What do you think, Mark? I mean, a
in.
lot of those elements, perhaps, you know, in the Brexit vote as well.
Well, yeah, it's true.
Gone too far.
But I think the issue here is that there's this oversensitivity from some council officials. I think most people who live in this country recognise broadly we have Christian traditions. Christmas is a public holiday, whether you're a Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, or whatever. And actually, this sort of issue has been around for quite a while. My late mother came in the 1950s. My late mother was German and came to Golders Green to a Jewish family. And there was one side of the family was very Orthodox, the other side wasn't. The non-Orthodox side had a Christmas tree up, Christmas presents for the children that had to be ushered away very quickly when the Orthodox side came a few days later. So we've had these sort of battles. But
yes, but we can only live cheek to jowl with different communities and different religious communities if we are confident in what we believe and if we are confident that the state will allow us to practice our religious beliefs, which is why, another thing that may do, which is so brilliant, is the faith school.
Let John get a word in anyway.
I mean, coalesce around common values. Is that the idea at some point?
Yes.
Yeah. And I think
John
the great majority of people want those common values, whatever your religion. Actually.
Yeah, I mean, the fastest growing faith group in Britain is people of no faith, and so the issue is really how can
we'll be nice to them too.
That's the Labour Party for you anyway.
How can we live together in such a way that we acknowledge that actually we are threatened by jihadist Islamist violence, but the biggest number of people who inform on jihadists are actually people from the Muslim community in Britain already.
Right.
Sure. Much food for thought. John McTernan, Christina Adone, Mark Field. Thank you all very much indeed for taking us through some of the stories there in the Sunday paper.